In September 1859, scientists observed the first confirmed powerful solar flare. The sun threw a large amount of radiation, energy, and plasma material into space. This was a massive and devastating disaster, but it happened 93 million miles away, so it probably wasn't such a big problem, right? Well, actually it was. A few hours after the flare was spotted, telegraph lines stopped working all over Europe and North America. Some of them sparked and caused fires. People realized that the sun was not only the source of light and warmth, but also danger. Scientists called that day the Carrington effect. The good news is that this happened in the middle of the 19th century and didn't cause serious problems for the planet. The bad news is that scientists are warning that in 2025, Earth will experience even more powerful solar storms caused by a coronal mass ejection. This is a giant cloud of plasma or charged gas. At one time, the sun can throw billions of tons of this material into space. Then, all this flies at high speed through space. Some of the material can reach our planet in 15 hours, the rest in a few days. During the journey, it captures and accelerates any charged particles encountered along the way, which increases its intensity and power. And then, this unstoppable array of energy crashes into our planet. It heats the upper layers of the atmosphere, increases its thickness, and disturbs the work of satellites. They slow down and lose altitude. Communication with satellites becomes unstable, GPS is buggy, data is poorly transmitted. Also, solar-charged gas penetrates into our power grids, transformer booths, and stations. It leads to massive failures that ruin the work of the entire technological chain. A powerful solar attack on several power plants can trigger a power outage in a large city. The internet, phones, social services, networks, nothing will work. We may lose connection with each other. Many large companies would go bankrupt, and the planet may face economic crises. These are big problems, but not the most serious ones. Electric plants serve boiler houses and water pumping stations. Solar storms could stop water from getting to our homes. You wouldn't be able to buy groceries in stores without cash. Of course, we can restore all this, but we'll have to live in the Iron Age for a while. But the worst thing is that a prolonged solar storm can suspend food production. For example, this year, a geomagnetic storm caused by solar storms shut down GPS satellites that are connected with modern tractors, so farmers couldn't work. What would happen if such storms happened every day for a year? We would probably start missing many items in supermarkets. Besides, maritime navigation also depends on satellites. Thanks to them, ships calculate the latitude and longitude of their location. If the satellites are damaged, ships may get lost in the ocean. Even whales get lost in the ocean during magnetic storms. Many birds navigate with the help of magnetic field during long flights to the south. So, not only people, but also animals may experience serious problems. Solar storms heat the upper layers of the Earth's atmosphere and thus make the air thicker. The movement of satellites slows down because of this air resistance. They lose altitude, and one of these satellites is Hubble. Yes, the very telescope that provides us with incredible pictures of space. Scientists say that it will fail much earlier because of solar attacks. You've probably heard on the news that solar activity has recently caused electromagnetic storms on Earth. But fortunately, it hasn't affected our lives in any way. The only problem was headaches, high pressure, and mood swings during those storms. It seems like an ordinary thing, but scientists don't have a consensus on this topic. No one has proven exactly how and why magnetic storms affect our condition. Yes, during storms, the planet's atmosphere becomes less dense, and perhaps this affects our blood pressure, like it happens when the weather changes. So people with cardiovascular system problems should be careful. But the effect on our nervous system, fortunately, is quite insignificant. It's possible that when people hear about a coming magnetic storm and feel unwell, they experience a placebo effect. But there's also good news. All these charged solar particles interact with atoms and molecules in Earth's atmosphere. This interaction leads to beautiful northern lights. It's good to spend some time away from your gadgets and look up at the sky sometimes. One of the biggest storms occurred on March 13, 1989. On March 10th, the Sun ejected a gigantic volume of coronal plasma. The amount of that material was the size of 36 Earths. The solar cloud was flying to us at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and a couple of days later, it crashed into our planet's magnetic field. The collision caused a geomagnetic superstorm. People watched some of the brightest and most beautiful auroras in history. The light show covered most of the planet, but after a beautiful performance, problems followed. The solar storm was so powerful that it went through the atmosphere and reached Earth's surface. First, it disrupted the operation of satellites and then damaged electrical networks. For example, it destroyed a transformer at a nuclear power plant in New Jersey. Energy companies in Canada went down because of systems overloading. As a result, about 6 million people in northeastern Canada lost electricity for 9 hours. This was the largest power outage caused by a geomagnetic storm. Yeah, there were more powerful storms in the mid-19th and early 20th centuries, but the planet wasn't covered by so many power grids at that time. More powerful storms may occur in 2025. The question is, will we be ready for them? Careful study of solar activity can help us prepare. If we know in advance about an upcoming storm, then scientists can switch off some systems and turn them on afterward, theoretically. If the activity of the sun increases every year, then we'll have to come up with new, innovative ways to protect ourselves. Who knows? Maybe scientists will cover all our electrical appliances and stations with a layer of special protective material. Anyway, we must do everything possible not to harm Earth's magnetic field, because if this shield disappears, the surface of our planet will resemble that of Mars. But what causes these solar storms, and why do they affect us so much? Okay, imagine a guy with a nice hairstyle who goes to bed. In the morning, his head is a complete mess. The magnetic fields of the sun are similar to this tousled hair. When the sun rotates, these fields burst, get tangled, stretch, and tear. At those moments, they release huge amounts of energy into space. This is not a problem for the sun, as the fields are restored during the process called magnetic reconnection. Such emissions can cause trouble for the planets in our system. When magnetic reconnection happens, several phenomena can follow. One of them you've already heard about. It's a coronal mass ejection. But there's another terrible thing that the sun does, and it's called solar flare. Imagine a bright burst of solar radiation containing electromagnetic waves, X-rays, radiation, and visible and ultraviolet light. During flares, the sun releases an enormous amount of this destructive energy, and it spreads through space at the speed of light. It takes 8 minutes for this explosive wave to reach our planet. Fortunately, we don't get much damage from these flares because Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect us. Strong flares can disrupt radio waves in the upper atmosphere and affect the operation of satellites, but it's nothing critical. Another solar phenomenon is called a radiation storm. These are accelerated electrons and protons that move at a speed slightly less than the speed of light. Thanks to Earth's magnetic field, radiation storms don't harm our planet too much, but they pose a danger to astronauts and satellites. These particles can penetrate human tissues and lead to serious health problems in the way radiation does, but only if you're in space or flying a plane in the upper atmosphere.
On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700, which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years. And since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700. But this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes. It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the U.S. has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area, stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake. It's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top $70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia Fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and 1,000,000 times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake. The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas Fault Line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas Fault Line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis, but there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed, but Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe. There is a powerful force hiding underground where tectonic plates meet, and one forces another under it. This happens in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Strain builds over centuries. The tension is unbearable until the megathrust awakens. The Earth shakes with a magnitude that can exceed 9 points, more powerful than any other earthquake. When the seafloor suddenly gets pushed up fast, it sends a huge ripple across the water, and a tsunami of huge force is out. These waves are called teletsunamis, and they cross entire ocean basins, ready to take over coastlines thousands of miles away. The thrust fault stretches over 600 miles. The Earth is not just shaking, it feels like it's tearing apart. This is the power of a megathrust earthquake. Those caught in its path will have to fight for their lives. Japanese authorities recently had to issue their first ever megaquake advisory. It happened because of a strong tremor on the edge of the Nankai Trough ocean floor zone. In the end, most of the warnings were lifted, and there wasn't much damage from the 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Parts of southwestern Japan started to shake, and the superfast trains in Japan slowed down to stay safe, which made travel slower for everyone. But everyone is staying alert as they know about the risk of a megathrust earthquake that could happen within the next few decades in the Nankai Trough. The tectonic plate under the Philippine Sea is slowly sliding underneath the land where Japan is, moving just a few inches every year. The last big earthquakes from this area happened in 1944 and 1946, both with a magnitude of 8.1. These quakes have caused a lot of destruction in the country. The next megathrust earthquake in the region, if it does happen, could be between a magnitude 8 and 9. Scientists still can't agree on how likely this mega earthquake is to happen, but it could be up to 80% certainty. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and it stretches from northern California to northern Vancouver Island in Canada. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happens every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and it worries scientists. They think this might be because the area is locked, meaning the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. Eventually, the part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. The ground on some inland hills could turn into something like quicksand. This would cause the hillsides to slide and crumble, taking down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse, including about 100 hospitals and 2,000 schools. People in Washington state might have to take care of themselves without help for 2 weeks, finding food, water, and shelter on their own. Scientists are studying slow slip events, where the tectonic plates move very slowly over weeks or months, releasing some energy but not enough to stop a big one. Every time the magnitude of an earthquake goes up by just one number, the energy it releases is 40 times bigger. So we'd need about 1 million small earthquakes every day for 500 years straight to release the same energy as one huge magnitude 9 earthquake. But these small earthquakes might be clues that a bigger earthquake is coming. To better monitor the Cascadia Fault, experts are mapping the fault more accurately and adding better monitoring tools offshore. Scientists receive over $10 million to install seismic sensors and seafloor pressure gauges on a fiber optic cable off the coast of Oregon. The goal is to be ready to warn people and potentially save lives when a big earthquake strikes. A sharp megathrust earthquake happened in this part of the world in 1964. It went down in history as the Great Alaska Earthquake and had a magnitude of 9.2. It lasted for more than 4 minutes, making it the most powerful earthquake in the history of the U.S. and North America. The ground shook so hard that it caused huge cracks and landslides. In Anchorage, many houses, buildings, and roads were destroyed because they weren't built to handle such a big earthquake. In some places, the land was permanently changed. For example, the coastline near Kodiak and Hinchinbrook Island was lifted by 30 feet. In other areas, like Gerwood and Portage, the ground sank by 8 feet. They had to rebuild roads higher so they wouldn't be flooded by the time. A huge 27-foot tsunami wiped out the entire village of Chiniga. Many coastal towns were heavily damaged, not just by the earthquake, but also by tsunamis and the fires that followed. After the main earthquake, there were thousands of smaller aftershocks for months. A moderate earthquake of magnitude 4.4 shook Los Angeles in August 2024. Once it was over, the LA Fire Department checked around the city and didn't find any major damage or anyone hurt. In the nearby city of Pasadena, which is close to the earthquake's epicenter, a water pipe burst inside City Hall and everyone had to leave the building. Thankfully, there was no danger of a tsunami. The best we can do to avoid panic in such situations is to be prepared. Japan is one of the places on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. Around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. The 1950 law set a rule that buildings should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is to not collapse and save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. Another technique is placing special pads made from materials like rubber at the base of a building. Some buildings are even built on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot, moving up to 5 feet. To stop it from getting damaged, engineers can add something called dampers every second floor all the way to the top. These dampers are like giant bicycle pumps, but instead of air, they're filled with liquid. When the building shakes, the dampers push against the liquid inside them. Even though the liquid doesn't squish very much, it can still absorb some of the shaking. When they're building tall skyscrapers, engineers try to make the structure as simple and balanced as possible. This means having each floor the same height and placing the support columns evenly. But sometimes, architects who design skyscrapers don't want to make these compromises because they have creative ideas for how the building should look. Then they have to find compromise solutions. For example, Tokyo's Skytree Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, is designed in a futuristic style but also includes special features to protect it from earthquakes. It has a central pillar, like in traditional Japanese pagodas, and seismic dampers that help absorb the energy from an earthquake, keeping the building safe.
A magnitude 15 earthquake has the potential to completely destroy our planet and evaporate all the water in a matter of seconds, leaving Earth uninhabitable. Over 500,000 earthquakes happen annually, but none have a magnitude of 15. 90% of quakes occur in the terrifying Ring of Fire zone located around the Pacific Ocean. The ground there is like jello. It shakes almost constantly. The most powerful earthquake to have ever struck Earth had a magnitude of 9.5. That much power can lengthen or shorten the day. But there's probably an earthquake in the confines of your own home now caused by a speck of dust landing on a table. But it has a power of negative 15 magnitudes. Earthquakes happen when tectonic plates move. They're like Lego pieces that are not properly secured, and when they move up, down, or hit one another, the ground also moves, triggering earthquakes. This tectonic energy acts like a battery. It stores energy for a long time, up to 500 years. When this stored energy is released in a sudden burst, the consequences are horrifying. Even the strongest structures submit to this relentless force that leaves a trail of destruction in its path. In some instances, earthquakes can even trigger tsunamis, amplifying the chaos. Such a crazy amount of power can split the ground open and cause severe damage. The strength of an earthquake is measured by the Richter scale, but now it's being replaced by the moment magnitude scale. When there's an earthquake, we hear about how strong it is. It's usually from 1 to 10. Luckily, we haven't had a Richter scale earthquake yet. The most powerful earthquake to have ever happened in modern history occurred in Chile in the 60s. It was around 9.5 on the Richter scale, and it altered Earth's rotation and messed up the length of the day by around 2 milliseconds. It also triggered a massive tsunami and affected a vast area of 155,000 square miles. The Richter scale doesn't actually have a limit. Still, anything above 25 doesn't need measuring, because if that ever happened, we would simply turn into dust, and nobody would care to measure this disaster. As we said, the strongest earthquake had a magnitude of 9.5. If this magnitude had been just 0.5 stronger, it would have created a ruptured line 2,174 miles long. That is almost 7 times the size of Wyoming. A magnitude 11 earthquake would create a crack halfway around the world. Massive tsunamis would hit coastal areas, destroying everything, and Earth would get into a massive environmental crisis. If you love hiking, you would have new mountains to explore, created by the terrifying earthquake. Even the temperature would increase because of volcanic eruptions and the resulting greenhouse gases. It would turn our planet into a hot oven. The safest places would be far away from any buildings, seas, oceans, and mountains where there would be a low chance of a landslide. Countries unprepared for earthquakes would be totally destroyed, and cities would turn into piles of rubble and dust. Going up on the Richter scale would only make things worse. But don't worry, an earthquake of that power is impossible. Earth's crust doesn't have enough energy to produce such earthquakes. But there is something that has much more power and can produce mega earthquakes. Asteroids are powerful enough to destroy our planet, as we all know from the dinosaur era. That asteroid was around 6 miles long, and it caused massive damage to the planet. It triggered earthquakes that shook the ground constantly for months. These terrifying quakes were about 50,000 times stronger than the Chile earthquake. They also triggered a tsunami that was 30,000 times more powerful than the Indian Ocean tsunami. And the latter was one of the most devastating tsunamis to have ever struck Earth. The earthquakes caused by the asteroid had a magnitude of 11, making it the most powerful and scariest natural disaster ever. And let's hope it stays that way. The Indian Ocean tsunami affected only certain areas of the world. Meanwhile, the asteroid tsunami affected every part of the world and had 33-foot-tall waves. Even if you had traveled to the most remote place on Earth, you wouldn't have been able to hide from this Grim Reaper. A 15-magnitude earthquake wouldn't be 15% stronger than the Chile earthquake. The scale doesn't work like that. It would be around 100 million times more powerful than a 9.5 magnitude quake. It could make all the water on Earth evaporate, leaving us devastated and without any H2O to survive. All ecosystems would collapse, all food chains would be broken, and only some super strong bacteria would probably survive the impossible. That is only a fraction of the frightening things that could happen. The ocean is like the AC for our planet. Without it, Earth would be super hot. The ocean also serves as a shield from the sun's powerful rays. It acts as a heat absorber and cools Earth. Scientists think that the most dangerous thing would be the inability of Earth's crust to survive the violent shakes of the 15-magnitude earthquake. If our planet miraculously survived and didn't turn into dust, there would be massive openings in its crust. The ground would become gelatinous. It would randomly move up, down, left, and right, and no building would survive that. Our civilization would be brought back to the Stonehenge era. Tectonic movements like this are devastating. A similar thing happened in Japan when tectonic plates moved 165 feet from each other and then snapped back together, creating a 9-magnitude earthquake. No place on Earth is immune to this bone-chilling natural phenomenon. Still, certain places have higher chances of being destroyed than others, like the Ring of Fire, where 90% of earthquakes happen. This is a place where earthquakes are almost everyday occurrences. The Ring of Fire is located in the Pacific Ocean. It forms a ring around the continents that surround the Pacific. There, several tectonic plates meet, creating highly unstable ground. To make the problem much more terrifying, 75% of active volcanoes are located in this area. 90% of dormant volcanoes are also there, making this place extremely dangerous. Scientists carefully study this region to find a way to predict when the next earthquake might strike. The Ring of Fire is not the only place at risk of earthquakes. In California, along the San Andreas fault line, 2 tectonic plates have been storing power for more than 200 years. The San Andreas Fault is 715 miles long and has the potential for a massive earthquake. This region has its fear of violent earthquakes like the one that happened in San Francisco in 1906. It had a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale. Scientists' predictions are terrifying. They say that the chance of a 6.7 magnitude earthquake is very high in the area. If all hell starts to break loose, you should know how to survive. Avoid anything that might fall on you, like windows, closets, or unstable ceilings. The official phrase from emergency experts is drop, cover, and hold on. Stay low to the ground. Hide under something stable like a table, and remain there until the shaking stops. Make sure to stay in your shelter for another minute or two, just in case there are aftershocks or loose debris. Use your nose and smell for gas. If you do smell it, don't turn the lights on or do anything that might ignite it. Stay strong and be safe.
Back in 2018, the biggest active underwater eruption ever happened, at least the one that we could officially record. Scientists followed earthquakes that struck the area in the western Indian Ocean off Madagascar. Between 2018 and 2021, over 11,000 earthquakes struck a small island called Mayan between Madagascar and Mozambique. The strongest one had a magnitude of 5.9. Until then, this area had been pretty peaceful. There had only been 2 earthquakes recorded over 50 years. Along with regular earthquakes, there were also some unusual seismic hums, like earthquakes at pretty low frequencies, forming deep underground. People couldn't feel those hums at the surface, but researchers around the world discovered them and realized they were related to volcanic activity no one actually noticed coming. Something strange happened. That underwater eruption created a giant skyscraper-sized volcano. This new underwater volcano turned out to be around 1.5 times the height of One World Trade Center in New York, and almost 10 times bigger than the Statue of Liberty. The area where it appeared had been explored in 2014, but it was almost flat, peaceful, and empty back then. Now, there is an actual volcano nearly 8,500 feet below sea level. The volcano gets its magma from a super profound reservoir located nearly 34 miles underground. It's the deepest reservoir of volcanic magma that we know about. The Earth has layers, and the middle one is kinda chunky. It's very much like peanut caramel filling many chocolates have. Research shows there are probably hunks of oceanic crust deep inside the Earth's liquid mantle. They're stuck there, creating large lumps in something that was supposed to be a smooth layer. Our planet has a rigid outer layer. It includes a hot upper mantle and cracked crust. The hot mantle moves and churns all the time, making the crust at the surface move too. This way, the oceanic crust dives into the depths and makes huge magma plumes go up toward the planet's surface. Scientists even found an ancient piece of the Pacific Ocean hundreds of miles underneath China. Those are the old remains of the Pacific seabed from long ago, and they were pulled downward below Earth's surface into the mantle transition zone. This rocky slab that used to be at the bottom of the ocean is made of the crust and some solid parts of the upper mantle. Most of the volcanic activity on our planet happens where we don't even see it, under the surface of the ocean. About 70% of all volcanic activity happens in the oceans, and mostly in the area of the South Pacific, with over 1,100 volcanoes squeezed into that area. Coastal cliffs, mountain changes, soils, and sediments that line valleys. These are only a small portion of the rocks on our planet. Oceans hide so much more deep down below the Earth's surface. In between the Earth's surface and its core is the mantle. It's a warm, thick layer of rock that moves and flows constantly. Some hundreds of miles below, there's a place where diamonds grow. As they form, they go through high temperatures and pressure, after which they eventually freeze. That way, when they arrive at the surface, scientists can explore their structure, find out how they formed, and understand better what's going on in the depths of our planet. Thanks to diamonds, they realized the mantle was very wet, and it possibly contained much more water than all the oceans on Earth. Our planet is eating up its own oceans. As its tectonic plates move, dive, and go beneath one another, they drag huge amounts of water into the Earth's interior. The water beneath the surface of our planet can help with developing magma and lubricate faults, which actually makes earthquakes more likely to happen. Water is actually stored in the minerals. It gets incorporated into the planet's crust when new oceanic plates form. They go through the process of bending and cracking as they grind under other plates, and huge amounts of water then go deep into the crust and mantle. Scientists research an area that's 18 miles under the surface. They realize these zones pull 3 billion teragrams, which is more than 2 billion pounds. Any ocean is like a whole new world. There are incredible sceneries below the surface, magnificent waterfalls, lakes, and rivers. There are thick layers of salt beneath the seafloor, and rivers and lakes form because seawater goes through those layers and dissolves them, creating something that resembles pools. The dissolved salt makes the surrounding water denser. That water then settles there, which eventually forms underwater lakes or rivers. But there are also mountain chains, trenches, canyons. There's a canyon in the Bering Sea with more than 8,500 feet of vertical relief. This makes the Grand Canyon look way smaller than it is, since the underwater canyon is nearly 2,500 feet deeper. Deep parts of the ocean are really cold. The temperature of the water can be about 40 degrees, but at the bottom, water can get boiling hot. There are hydrothermal vents in the seafloor. Those are the hot springs located at the edges of tectonic plates. The water they release can reach a temperature of up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit, but the pressure at such depths is very intense. So intense, no human being can handle it. Still, it's the pressure that keeps the water from boiling. Ocean depth is on average 2.3 miles. Light waves can still enter at 3,280 feet, even though it's in a very small amount. So all the mysteries hidden below that point remain in total darkness. The actual illuminated part of the ocean goes until 600 feet. Even though the sun gives us light, most of our planet is dark all the time. It's all because of the oceans, covering over 70% of our planet. The loudest sound that came from an ocean, and of the loudest sounds ever recorded, came from an ice quake. It was so loud, researchers picked it up by sensors more than 3,000 miles away. There was a seismic activity that made frozen ground break down. The Antarctic ice sheet is bigger than the continental part of the United States and Mexico together. A big iceberg from Antarctica holds over 20 billion gallons of water, which could make a 5-year water supply for 1 million people. Humans can generally drink sea ice, although we can't drink seawater. As time goes by and the ice ages, the brine trapped between ice crystals drains out. That way, ice becomes fresh enough to consume it. If all the ice sheets and glaciers we have on the Earth melted at the same time, the sea level would rise another 260 feet, which is just a little shorter than the Statue of Liberty, the height of a 26-story building. Clams live long enough to tell us more about oceans past. Ancient mollusks can live for more than 500 years. To learn more about a tree, you can use its rings to see how old it is. To learn how old a mollusk is, you can examine its rings within the shell and tell. This is also how scientists get information about the ocean, climate, and whatsoever. Clams can help take a look at what happened about 1,000 years ago. The Earth doesn't have 4 but 5 oceans now. The new one, called the Southern Ocean, was officially recognized only a few months ago. It borders the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, so scientists couldn't agree if it's really a new ocean or just part of the colder regions of these 3. We don't only divide oceans on maps, each has different conditions for unique marine species. For example, the Southern Ocean has leopard seals, orcas, minke whales, emperor penguins, and other animals that live in cold, icy seas. It's also home to krill, small creatures that look like shrimp and are food for many bigger animals that live there. Life on our planet started about 3.5 billion years ago. I wasn't around then. It's still a mystery how and when exactly, but some theories say life could have first emerged in the depths of the ocean. A few years ago, scientists found microscopic tubes and filaments within rocks formed about 4 billion years ago. These rocks are fragments of ancient oceanic crust. Also, these tiny tubes and filaments are similar to microbes that can still be found on hydrothermal vents in deep parts of the ocean. The idea is these living cells found conditions to stay alive in tiny rocky pores inside the chimneys of those vents, and started the amazing adventure of the evolution of life on our planet. You have friends over for dinner. You set your drink on the counter and go help your friend set out some desserts. When you get back, you notice the liquid in your cup. It's sloshing around and the ice cubes look like ships on a rough sea. Now you feel it too. On the ceiling, the chandelier is swinging like mad. Then you hear someone scream, "Earthquake!" The house and everything in it is rocking back and forth. You try to run for cover, but the shaking keeps you stuck in place, fighting to keep your balance. The cabinets look possessed, and glasses and dishes fly out and smash on the floor. The bookshelves topple over, and everything hanging on the walls sways and falls off. You duck under the dining room table, trying not to get hurt on all those broken dishes. Yeah, you've been through earthquakes before, but none like this. Checking your phone? Typical, no signal. You can't believe what's about to happen. The screams get louder, and suddenly the whole house collapses. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. Disaster came in the afternoon, just when everyone was out enjoying themselves. To cause serious, life-changing damage, you need to have a magnitude of around 7 or so on the Richter scale. This one was 9.5. This part of Chile is smack dab on the so-called Ring of Fire, the most active volcanic and seismic area in the world along the Pacific Rim. The initial shaking lasted around 10 minutes, and after 2 days, many aftershocks were still strong enough to set off a volcano in the south of the country. But that's not where it ended. The earthquake unleashed a series of tidal waves all over the Pacific Ocean, with some reaching over 80 feet high. The waves in earthquake were so strong that they even affected Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. It caused around $500 million $1960 worth of damage. Many were left homeless. Much of their infrastructure was smashed too. Buildings as far as the eye could see were toppled, and debris piled everywhere. Scientists estimate that this earthquake was so powerful, It shifted the Earth's axis, making our days 1.26 microseconds shorter. That might not seem like a lot, but think about it. Just one natural disaster was strong enough to make time move. Many of the coastal cities were flattened and floods were widespread. The economy spiraled downward. According to studies, if this earthquake happened today, it caused more than $20 billion in damages. So, what would happen if an earthquake twice that size hit without warning? For starters, you'd likely feel the effects even further away. Tidal waves wouldn't just hit the coasts of Japan and the Philippines. They would move even further to China, Korea, Vietnam, and even Australia. And those waves would be significantly higher than 80 feet, perhaps double that. That's like 8 giraffes piled on top of each other, surfing your way. If you lived by the coast, you'd notice the waves. If you saw the water recede way back so you could practically see where all the fish call home, you'd know it was time to run. Chances are that a tsunami's heading your way. Say it really happens. You're caught under the wreckage, not knowing what's going on. You manage to free yourself and escape to the fresh air. And you're not alone, because all the houses in the neighborhood have turned into piles of bricks and rubble. The bridges have also collapsed, leaving people stranded on either side. You look around, dust yourself off, and rush to find help. Fire trucks and ambulances drive between the broken-down cars and rubble. You try to make it to your car, but the aftershocks are still hitting, and you're getting tossed to the sidewalk. With all the cell towers down, you can't call anyone on your phone. Your knees are shaking, but you manage to power through. Once you reach your car, you see it crushed under a boulder, like a giant soda can. You continue on foot and eventually reach downtown. It looks as if some giant got angry and knocked all the buildings down. You push forward and try to see if you can find some help. Without warning, your phone vibrates. You check it and see 1,000 notifications about a 20-magnitude earthquake. You're still shaking, but that's all you. The ground is still for now. Uh-oh. You hear something in the distance, racing towards you. To your right, you see tidal waves as tall as buildings charging at you. Still in shock, not knowing what to do, you now come to your senses and run. You don't even know which way to go. There's a tsunami right behind you, and in front of you are broken down buildings with rocks and concrete still falling everywhere. Wait, there's a building that's somehow still standing. You need to get on top of that thing. You reach the elevator, but it's jammed. Not surprising. You bolt up the stairs as fast as you can, tripping on broken glass and plaster, but always managing to get back up. You look out a window and see the water. It's so close. You're nearly at the top. A few more flights and… whoosh. The water forces its way into the building and drags you down at least 2 floors. You can barely see anything. Still, you know you must swim up. But the water keeps forcing you downwards. After about 30 seconds, you manage to swim your way out and continue climbing to the top. You scramble to the top floor and collapse on the roof. You're safe for now. The tidal wave is still going strong, plowing its way through the ravaged city center. Your phone is now waterlogged and useless. You have a perfect 360-degree view of your town covered in water and debris. The ground starts to shake again. Maybe you'll just sit around until this is all over, waiting for the rescue helicopter. But then, a loud explosion that almost breaks your eardrums shakes the ground even more. Off in the distance, smoke is rising, and soon it covers the entire sky. Darkness hides the morning sun. That's when you can see lava shooting up into the air and landing nearby. The lava forms into a river, flowing its way into town block by block. With this much seismic movement and the high intensity of the earthquake, the world's tectonic plates have shifted so that magma is pushing its way to the surface. From the earth, steam begins to vent. Then the heat hits you. You see the magma cover the ground like a blanket, eating up every car in its way. What's worse is that the magma is melting the foundations of the buildings that managed to withstand the earthquake and the tsunami. The buildings in the distance are now sinking and collapsing into the raging lava pool that's replaced your town. One by one, every building descends. That means, the building where you're standing is also swaying. It's about to fail. That's when you see the light. You look up and see a helicopter above in the distance. You wave your arms, run around, jump, anything to get noticed. And it works. The chopper makes a few circles and finally drops you a rope ladder. As you're lifted in the chopper, you take a good look at the world below you as it wriggles around like noodles in a strainer. You land a few miles out and are immediately treated by a doctor in an emergency triage center. You were one of the lucky ones. A year later, the tsunami water has receded. The lava that flowed inland has cooled. But all that magma permanently changed the ground below it, and the whole town is gone. The disaster has thrown the entire country into a financial nightmare that'll last decades. It takes months to survey the town, making sure there's no dangerous electrical wires or busted gas pipes anywhere. They're rebuilding your town farther inland from where the old one was. In other towns, they rebuild directly over the ruins. In others, they just decide to move everyone to a nearby city. The strongest earthquake ever to strike east of the Mississippi River that happened over 200 years ago was never over, according to some scientists. Most earthquakes last seconds to minutes, and the official record breaker so far is a silent one in Sumatra that was going on for 32 years. This slow slip event triggered a massive quake and a tsunami. So, if it's true that the New Madrid earthquake is still sending aftershocks, we'll have a new top name for this sad list. The earthquake started in December of 1811 with a powerful quake in a sparsely populated part of northeast Arkansas. They felt the shaking almost 1,000 miles away in the White House, and the tower bells were ringing in Boston, even further away. It even made the mighty Mississippi flow backward for a few minutes over new waterfalls formed by shifted ground. The town of New Madrid, Missouri completely disappeared in the disaster. The Earth wouldn't stay still until the end of January the following year, when things got serious again. A massive quake hit, this time near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, right in the Missouri boot heel. Geologists believe it was a rupture on the New Madrid fault, putting even more strain on the nearby Reelfoot fault. Just when people thought it couldn't get worse, another 2 weeks of trembling passed, and the Reelfoot fault snapped deep beneath New Madrid. Down in Tennessee, about 15 miles south of New Madrid, the ground uplift created Reelfoot Lake. Steamboats were chugging along the river, with thousands of trees floating and acres of woods torn apart by the quake. In St. Louis, Missouri, which is 160 miles away, buildings were badly damaged, and chimneys fell in Cincinnati, Ohio, 400 miles away. People all the way in Montreal, Canada, over 1,000 miles away, felt the earthshake. Seismologists have registered about 200 small earthquakes in the New Madrid seismic zone every year since 1974. Some researchers believe that up to 30% of those were aftershocks from those big quakes back in 1811 and 1812. In parts of the U.S. where there's not much tectonic action going on, these aftershocks could keep rumbling for years, maybe even centuries, after the big ones hit. Aftershocks are the Earth's way of releasing all that built-up stress from the main quake. When the ground shakes from the first earthquake, it puts a lot of pressure on the rocks nearby. And when those rocks can't take it anymore, they crack, causing even more shaking. That's the aftershock. And they can be pretty intense, especially right after the main quake, but weaken over time. Not all scientists agree that contemporary earthquakes have to do with those from 200 years ago. We mostly associate faults with those lines where Earth's plates meet. But there's a whole network of those right under the center of the North American plate. They're like relics from 750 million years ago, when North America was part of a supercontinent called Rodinia. When Rodinia started to break up, it left behind these rifts, weak spots in the Earth's crust that run deep beneath the modern Midwest. It could explain the earthquake action. An international team of geologists decided to take a fresh look at 3 major earthquakes that shook North America and end the debate. They used a new math method called the nearest neighbor. It says that if earthquakes are too close in space, time, and magnitude to be independent background events, then one is assumed to have triggered the other. Depending on how you look at the numbers, somewhere between 10 to 65% of the recent quakes in the region could be aftershocks of those historic earthquakes. And a huge quake that hit Charleston, South Carolina at the end of the 19th century might explain up to 72% of the earthquakes in the area since then. But not all places are the same, so the scientific debate continues. In 1774, British explorer James Cook noticed a glow in the distance. It was the volcano of Mount Yasur in Vanuatu. This bad boy had been spewing lava and ash ever since, and it's quite likely that it's been doing that for way longer. The volcano has been sitting at alert level since October 2016, which means things are really unsettled around there. They've even marked off a 2,000-foot radius around the crater to keep people safe. There have been low to moderate outbursts, shooting out ash, gas, and steam, and some bigger blasts throwing stuff outside the crater. Satellite images have picked up on some hot spots of sulfur dioxide plumes, showing that Yasur is still cooking up a big storm down there. Stromboli, one of the volcanic islands near Sicily, officially has the Guinness World Record as the longest continuously erupting volcano. It has been putting on a fiery show for over 2,400 years straight. Ancient sailors nicknamed it the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Most of the time, Stromboli's just spitting out spatter, but every now and then it throws in some lava flows or shoots up some moderately high fountains. Sometimes you might even catch a glimpse of steam-driven outbursts. Over 200 million years ago, the world went through a major makeover, with not one, not two, but 4 massive volcanic eruptions changing the game. It all happened in Rensselaer, a large chunk of island that used to be a supermassive volcano stretching across what's now British Columbia and Alaska. This volcanic activity might have helped dinosaurs grow from cat-sized critters into giants we saw in Jurassic Park. It kicked off a 2-million-year rainy season. It made the whole world hot and humid, and the dinos just loved it. Researchers dug deep into sediment layers beneath an ancient lake in China to uncover these secrets. They found traces of volcanic ash and mercury, clear signs of those epic eruptions. There were carbon signatures showing huge spikes in carbon dioxide levels, making the atmosphere toasty and the rain pouring down. It all happened in 4 separate pulses, each triggered by those monstrous volcanic blasts. There's a spot in a national park not too far away from Sydney, Australia, where a fire has been raging deep underground for at least 6,000 years. They call it Burning Mountain, and it's a coal seam fire, burning its way through a layer of coal beneath the Earth's surface. Once these underground fires start, they're pretty much impossible to put out. This ball of fire is up to 30 feet wide and extremely hot, but there's no flame, it's smoldering. The fire has been creeping along at a pace of about 3 feet per year. A local farmer first spotted it in the 19th century and thought it was a volcano. The people who have lived here for ages believe this place is sacred. They've used it for cooking and crafting tools, and tell that it started from a widow's tears or the torch of a hero. But experts think it could have been a lightning strike or coal heating up like a summer barbecue from the interaction with oxygen. Some say it might have been burning since before the dinosaurs roamed the Earth. No one knows exactly how long this mountain will burn or in what direction it'll move. Right now, the coal has enough oxygen to burn for centuries or even millennia without human intervention. The fire is heating up the mountain like a giant oven, making it crack and crumble, inviting in more oxygen to feed on. Even if humans decide to take action, these coal seam fires need truckloads of water and liquid nitrogen to tame them. Several years ago, explorers noticed that the smolder was creeping close to a cliff overlooking a little river. And depending on what the coal seam decides to do next, we could see some dramatic changes here in the coming decades. There could be flames with much more heat, or the coal seam could go deep, extinguish itself, and smolder out. On July 23, 2024, Europe's Solar Orbiter spacecraft observed a super-powerful solar flare erupting from the far side of the Sun. This flare wasn't the most extreme ever recorded, but still, we got extremely lucky this time not to get fried by it. Such solar flares often cause long-lived, raging radiation storms, and if such a storm moves in the direction of Earth, it can lead to worldwide blackouts. Before we go deeper into details of that potentially disastrous solar flare, we need to figure out what exactly this solar phenomenon is. Solar flares occur because the magnetic fields in the atmosphere of our star are moving non-stop. When the Sun is approaching its solar maxima, and that's the most active period of its 11-year-long cycle, which is, by the way, exactly what's happening now, its magnetic fields get more and more tangled, making our star look like an enormous ball of tangled rubber bands. They loop around, cross over one another, cut one another off, and then reconnect. Ever seen iron filings sprinkled on a bar magnet? These filings line up along the magnetic lines of force. Like that, the hot plasma on the surface of the Sun is at the mercy of the magnetic lines of force. Sometimes, when the magnetic fields interact with each other, some plasma gets disconnected from the fields, and its particles accelerate to immense speeds and send powerful radiation to space. That's what a solar flare is. Other times, our star throws off massive amounts of matter. Those events are coronal mass ejections, CMEs. Just one CME can contain as much as 20 billion tons of material. If that material were rock, it would create a mountain about 2.75 miles across and almost a half a mile tall. The ejected material often travels at a speed of over 1,000,000 miles per hour. Solar flares and CMEs are the most powerful explosions in the solar system, releasing unimaginable amounts of energy. Solar flares have their own classification according to their strength. The smallest and weakened ones are A and B class. Then there are C and M class solar flares, and the strongest are X class flares. A number from 1 to 9, and in some cases a larger one, accompanies each letter. That's similar to the Richter scale for earthquakes. A and B class flares are too weak to affect our planet. As for C class flares, they may have small, noticeable consequences. M class flares can cause short radio blackouts at the poles and weak radiation storms that can still harm astronauts. But the most dangerous of them all are X class flares. These are flares more than 10 times more powerful than X1. That's why the classification of X class flares can go higher than 9. Now let's get back to that recent solar flare. It was X14 Class 1. Now, we already know that it means it was an extra strong flare. Other large flares astronomers have detected recently include an X12 solar flare that happened on the 20th of May and an X10 flare that occurred on the 17th of July. All of them have come from the backside of the Sun. If we talk of the Earth side of our star, the largest solar flare that has been recorded so far within this solar cycle happened on the 14th of May. It was an X8.7 flare that led to radio blackouts, and a strong geomagnetic storm leading to magnificent auroras all over the world occurred a few days earlier. Powerful coronal mass ejections accompanied this storm. As for the July X-class flare, it was so powerful that it could have ended up tragically for us. Luckily, all that magnetically charged plasma blast that accompanied the flare didn't travel in our direction. If it had, it would have been quite the solar storm. Auroras would have been incredibly impressive and a wee bit terrifying in their magnificence. But at the same time, such a dynamic blast of energetic particles hurtling our way could have caused major technological problems and electrical blackouts, like the event in 1989, which severely harmed Quebec's power grid, or a much earlier catastrophe that still managed to cause a lot of harm to the world. I'm talking about the Carrington event, which occurred in 1859 and was the first documented solar flare affecting our planet. It happened on the 1st of September and was named after Richard Carrington, the solar astronomer who witnessed the flare through his own telescope and sketched the Sun's sunspots. According to scientists, That flare was the most powerful documented solar storm over the last 500 years. The Carrington event triggered auroras that were visible as far south as the Caribbean. It led to severe interruptions in telegraph services all over the world, even shocking some telegraph operators and sparking fires after discharges from the lines ignited telegraph paper. Another major solar flare that erupted on the 4th of August, 1972, destroyed long-distance phone communication across a few states, including Illinois. This event even made the American Telephone and Telegraph Company redesign its power system for transatlantic cables. Now let's move to March 1985, when two super-powerful CMEs triggered a geomagnetic storm, which, in turn, set off a power blackout in Canada on the 13th of March. This blackout left around 6 million people without electricity for 9 hours. It is said that the flare disrupted electric power transmission from the Hydro-Quebec generation station and melted a few power transformers in New Jersey. And still, this solar flare was nowhere near the power of the Carrington event. The Bastille Day solar storm took its name from the French national holiday because it occurred on the same day, on the 14th of July in the year 2000. It was an X5 class event that caused some satellites to short-circuit and resulted in radio blackouts. It's still one of the most highly observed solar storm events. From October to November 2003, our star unleashed a series of large solar flares and coronal mass ejections, and they did reach Earth and slam into our atmosphere. Those solar storms, also known as Halloween storms of 2003, caused aircraft to be rerouted, impacted satellite systems, and led to power outages in Sweden. Besides, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory couldn't fulfill its functions during this solar onslaught. On the 28th of October 2003, the Sun sent a whopper of a solar flare our way. The fire was so powerful it overwhelmed the spacecraft sensor that was measuring it. The sensor topped out at a whopping X28. But later, scientists figure out that the flare had reached a peak strength of about X45. One more thing that made the Halloween storms so scary was that they happened during a time in the solar cycle when solar activity is usually quiet. That's 2 to 3 years after the solar maximum. According to NASA's statistics, just 17 powerful flares erupted from our star during that time. The Sun spewed out another X-class solar flare on the 5th of December 2006. It was an X9 class flare that disrupted satellite-to-ground communications and GPS navigational signals for around 10 minutes. That solar storm was so powerful it even damaged the Solar X-ray Imager instrument on the GOES 13 satellite. It sustained damage to several pixels of its detector. In February 2022, SpaceX experienced the terrifying power of our star when a devastating geomagnetic storm destroyed 38 Starlink satellites worth tens of millions of dollars. It happened shortly after they were deployed. Unfortunately, Starlink satellites are especially vulnerable to geomagnetic storms since they're released into extremely low-altitude orbits, between 60 and 120 miles. They also rely on their onboard engines to overcome the drag force and raise themselves to their final altitude of around 350 miles over the surface of our planet. The thing is, during a geomagnetic storm, Earth's atmosphere absorbs energy from the storm, heats up, and extends upwards. It results in a denser thermosphere, which means more drag, and it can be a serious issue for satellites. That's exactly what happened. The batch of newly released Starlink satellites didn't manage to overcome the increased drag and started to fall back, eventually burning up in the atmosphere. A space mission like this has never been done before. Nearly 20 years in the making. It's so precise that even a millimeter of error could ruin the whole thing. Two satellites are floating hundreds of miles above the Earth with one big goal: to create artificial solar eclipses on demand. This could change how we study the Sun forever. But pulling it off is insanely difficult. And let's just say, NASA and the ESA are holding their breath. Proba 3 has successfully launched and already shows promising results. It's made up of 2 satellites that will fly in perfect formation. Their goal is to block out the sun in space. Well, why do we need that? Because solar eclipses are actually very useful for studying the sun's corona, its glowing outer atmosphere. The sun is obviously super bright, so its corona is only clearly visible during rare fleeting moments when the moon perfectly covers the star during an eclipse. But what if we could recreate that effect anytime? That's Proba 3's main task. One satellite acts as an occulter, a giant sun-blocking disk. It also carries a wide disk about 5 feet wide, which acts like an artificial moon, blocking out the sun's light. The other is a coronagraph. It should capture detailed images of the corona. There's also a third device that should study space weather and how solar storms affect our planet. It's insane how perfectly precise they must be for this to work. They must stay perfectly aligned with their position shifting by no more than a single millimeter, about the thickness of a fingernail, all while they're floating high away from Earth in space with no strings attached. This project was a team effort and a pretty big historical moment. This is the first time that an ESA mission is launched from India since 2001. Proba 3 was built with contributions from 13 European countries, along with Canada. There was a small hiccup before departure, though. The air freight company refused to accept the satellites because their batteries were still inside. The engineers had to remove the batteries and ship them separately. Not ideal, but a small price to pay for getting the mission to the launch pad. The idea first came to mind in 2005 to ESA scientists, and after years of planning, designing, and testing, the mission finally lifted off on December 5, 2024. For the first few weeks after launch, the 2 satellites stayed connected. Scientists run tests to ensure they were functioning properly. During this time, the coronagraph took its first-ever space image. It captured a beautiful star field in the Ophiuchus constellation. Then, on January 14, 2025, the real mission began. The 2 spacecraft successfully separated from each other. Over the following weeks, ESA's engineers carefully brought them back together to keep controlled distance. Now that they're in orbit, Proba 3 satellites work in a highly elliptical orbit, swinging between 372 and about 37,000 miles from Earth. This should help ease the Earth's gravitation, meaning the satellites won't need to burn as much fuel to stay perfectly aligned. The spacecraft also communicate with each other using lasers, adjusting their distances in real time. This level of control has never been attempted on this scale before. But the Proba 3 mission isn't only about looking at the sun. The second satellite, the occulter, has its own mission. It carries DARA, an instrument that will measure the sun's total energy output. This is incredibly important for climate studies. Scientists need to know how much solar energy reaches Earth. If Proba 3 succeeds, it'll prove that satellites can fly in space autonomously while staying super precise. This could open the door to entirely new types of space missions. For example, giant telescopes in space, where separate satellites act as one enormous lens. Or more advanced climate monitoring with precision instruments orbiting Earth together. Finally, deep space exploration. Spacecraft could team up to explore planets and moons in ways never seen before. 2025 is going to be full of insane space missions. It's packed with lunar landings, asteroid visits, and planetary flybys. But space is never easy. Missions get delayed, some never launch, and others surprise us. First, IMAP, Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe. This one will launch in September, and it should help us unlock the secrets of interstellar space. It will travel super far away to study the boundary between our solar system and interstellar space. This mission will help us learn more about cosmic rays, solar winds, and what happens when the sun's influence stops and the actual terrifying space begins. Next, PUNCH and SPHEREX. These 2 were already launched on March 11, 2025. PUNCH will help predict solar storms before they hit Earth. It will track solar winds from the Sun to Earth and help us understand space weather better. Space weather is important because it can damage satellites and power grids. And SPHEREX will map the entire sky in infrared light, capturing the spectra of millions of galaxies. It could reveal the secrets of how galaxies formed after the Big Bang. Next, we've got TON-2, which should launch sometime in May. It will visit the legendary asteroid Kamao'aliwa. Many years ago, this asteroid might have been a chunk of the Moon, and now it orbits the Sun. The next one is ESCAPADE. Once again, 2 spacecraft, 1 Mars mission. ESCAPADE should be launched somewhere during 2025. It will send 2 small spacecraft to Mars to study how the solar winds influence our red buddy. Many years ago, Mars used to be like early Earth. It had a thick atmosphere and liquid water, but it's now a dry, cold desert. ESCAPADE will help us understand what exactly happened. How and why did Mars lose its atmosphere? 2025 will also be packed with lunar missions. Unfortunately, not all missions are going to be successful. For example, the IM-2 lunar lander reached the Moon's surface on March 6th. It was supposed to land near the Moon's south pole to search for water ice. Finding water on the Moon would be incredibly important for our future human missions. If we find a method to turn this water ice into normal water, we'll be able to build entire settlements there. Well, IM-2 was marched on February 27th. It traveled to the Moon successfully and prepared for landing. It made it to the surface, but something went wrong. Communication was lost temporarily, and no one really knew why. When NASA re-established contact, they saw that the lander wasn't in the correct position. One of its 2 radio antennas wasn't working. Turns out it landed sideways, and now solar panels can't generate enough power. And without power, the lander couldn't keep working. By March 7th, the battery was completely drained and the mission was over. But there are more plans. In late 2025, they should launch the Griffin lunar lander. The rover it will bring should explore the Nobile crater, a key target for future Moon bases. In somewhere between 2025 and 2026, they want to try the IM-3 lunar mission. It's going to be a 3rd lander with multiple science experiments. Now, what about the planets? NASA's Europa Clipper is currently headed to Jupiter's icy moon Europa. Scientists have suspicions that this place could have water. It might even become a place for future human missions. On March 1st, Europa Clipper flew by Mars and used its gravity to speed up. On August 31st, ESA's JUICE spacecraft, another one that aims at Jupiter's icy moons, will fly by Venus. They might even snap some pretty pictures along the way. Finally, Juno's mission nears its end. Since 2016, NASA's Juno spacecraft has been orbiting Jupiter. It gave us breathtaking images and crucial data. Now, it's running out of time. If all goes as planned, Juno will continue until September before being deliberately crashed into Jupiter to avoid contaminating its moons. All these missions are pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, and we're just getting started.
In May 2024, stunning auroras adorning the night sky demonstrated all the power that solar storms emit as radiation. But sometimes, our sun does things that are far more destructive. I'm talking about solar particle events. During these events, blasts of protons coming directly from the surface of the sun can shoot out like giant cosmic searchlights. According to records, an extreme particle event hits Earth every 1,000 years or so. It often causes bad damage to the ozone layer and increases levels of ultraviolet radiation closer to the surface of our planet. Luckily, Earth's magnetic field acts as a powerful protective cocoon for our planet, fending off electrically charged radiation from the sun. In its normal state, this field functions like a ginormous bar magnet, with field lines rising from one pole, looping around the planet, and dropping at the other pole. This pattern is sometimes called an inverted grapefruit. This vertical orientation of the magnetic field at the poles allows some ionizing cosmic radiation to get through the field as far down as the upper atmosphere. There, it interacts with gas molecules and produces the glow we know as auroras. But over time, Earth's protective bubble changes. In the past century, the North Magnetic Pole moved across northern Canada at a speed of about 25 miles per year. Plus, it weakened by more than 6%. Even more shockingly, According to geological records, there have been periods of time as long as centuries and millennia when our planet's magnetic field was super weak or entirely absent. But we'll talk about those tragic times later. It's easy to imagine what our planet would look like without its protective bubble if you look at Mars. The red planet lost its global magnetic field long ago. And once this field disappeared, most of Mars's atmosphere vanished too. In May 2024, a strong solar particle event hit the planet. It disrupted the operation of the Mars Odyssey spacecraft and made radiation levels at the surface of the red planet rise around 30 times higher than what a person receives during a chest X-ray. The Sun's outer atmosphere constantly emits a changing stream of electrons and protons, the solar wind. At the same time, the surface of the star also produces bursts of energy, mostly protons, during solar particle events. These bursts of energy have a connection to solar flares, extremely powerful bursts of electromagnetic radiation that can last from minutes to hours. Protons are way heavier than electrons and carry more energy. That's why they can reach lower levels of Earth's atmosphere, exciting gas molecules in the air. These excited molecules emit X-rays invisible to the unaided eye. Dozens and hundreds of relatively weak solar particle events happen during every solar cycle. Now, let's speak about solar cycles for a minute. You see, from a distance, the Sun seems to be calm and steady, but if you zoom in, you'll see that its surface is constantly seething and churning. It keeps transforming from a uniform ocean of fire to a chaos of warped plasma and back again in a repeating cycle. Every 11 years or so, the magnetic field of our star gets tangled up. Imagine a ball of tightly wound rubber bands. That's what it looks like at such moments. And then, at one point, it snaps and flips completely, turning the North Pole into the South Pole, and vice versa. Right before this event, the Sun steps up its activity. It starts to spit out giant blobs of fiery plasma, emit powerful streams of radiation, and grow planet-sized spots. This period has the name of solar maximum. It's a rather dangerous time for Earth, since it gets regularly hit by solar storms. Such storms have the potential to disrupt communications and damage power infrastructure. Even worse, solar storms can harm astronauts working in space and even make satellites crash into the planet. As the cycle ends, it fades back to the solar minimum, and then a new cycle begins. Anyway, back to our solar particle events. Researchers have found traces of extremely strong solar events happening throughout the history of Earth. And some of them were thousands of times stronger than anything our modern instruments have ever recorded. Such extreme solar particle events happen approximately every few millennia. The most recent one occurred around 993 CE. Beyond the immediate effect they have, solar particle events can kickstart a chain of chemical reactions in the upper atmosphere. And these processes often lead to depletion of ozone, which isn't a good thing. Ozone absorbs harmful solar UV radiation, which can damage not only our eyesight, but also the DNA of living beings. Plus, changing the amounts of ozone in the atmosphere can impact the climate. In a recent study, researchers used large computer models to examine how extreme solar particle events affect Earth. They found out that if a solar proton event arrives during a period of time when our planet's magnetic field is very weak, then ozone damage can last for 6 years, and the level of UV radiation might increase by 25%, boosting solar-induced DNA damage by around 50%. And apparently, this dramatic combination of a weak magnetic field and extreme solar proton events happens quite often. And some researchers believe that it may even explain a few mysterious occurrences in the past of our planet. For example, the most recent period of weak magnetic field started 42,000 years ago and lasted for around 1,000 years. This period included a temporary switch in the North and South poles. Several major evolutionary events happened during that time. For example, the last Neanderthals disappeared in Europe, along with the extinction of marsupial megafauna in Australia. Yeah, sadly, we won't see any giant wombats and giant kangaroos anymore. One more, even bigger evolutionary event might also be linked to Earth's geomagnetic field. Multicellular animals appeared at the end of the Ediacaran period, which started around 635 million years ago, and it occurred after a 26 million year period of extremely weak or even absent magnetic field. The rapid evolution of different groups of animals in the Cambrian explosion, about 539 million years ago, might have also been related to high UV levels and geomagnetism. The simultaneous evolution of hard body shells and eyes in multiple unrelated groups could have been necessary to detect and avoid harmful incoming UV rays. A complete reversal of Earth's geomagnetic poles might have a serious impact on the climate of our planet. Luckily, such flips don't happen overnight. The entire process stretches over thousands of years. Plus, even though the magnetic pole weakens during a pole reversal, it doesn't disappear completely. That's why the magnetosphere continues protecting the planet from cosmic rays and charged solar particles, even though there might be some amount of particulate radiation that will make it to Earth's surface. Our planet's magnetic fields are generated by moving electric charges. If some material allows these charges to easily move in it, it's called a conductor. Metal is a great conductor, and we often use it to transfer electric currents from one place to another. In this case, the electric current's negative charge, called electrons, move through the metal. The current is what generates a magnetic field. Earth's outer core is made of liquid iron and nickel. In other words, there are layers and layers of conducting material inside our planet. Currents of charges are constantly moving throughout the core, and the liquid metal is also moving and circulating there, generating the magnetic field. This magnetic field, in turn, produces something resembling a bubble around the planet. It's called the magnetosphere, and it's located above the uppermost part of the atmosphere. This layer shields and deflects high-energy cosmic ray radiation, which otherwise would be extremely hazardous to people and other forms of life on Earth. The magnetosphere also interacts with the ionosphere, the layer of our planet's atmosphere containing loads of ions and free electrons and capable of reflecting radio waves. The interaction between these two layers and magnetized solar winds is what scientists call space weather. The solar wind is normally mild, and there's no space weather whatsoever.